Welcome to Quilt Central, celebrating quilting and everyday living, with your hosts, Janie Donaldson and Cindy Walter.
Our guest today is not only an author, but one of my very favorite designers. Join me in welcoming Joyce Drexler. Hi, Joyce.
Oh, Cindy, it's such a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm so excited about our project today.
I am too. It's gorgeous. Let's show it first.
The little tote bag is an appliqued delight because it's got three-dimensional leaves, it's got some embroidery from computer embroidery, as well as just free motion work.
Boy, it's very effective. All the textures and layers on there.
It's really simple.
I think you're gonna find. Well, show me then.
Okay, it's a very simple technique. You know, you have your pattern pieces, and what I've done is separated them into color groups.
Oh, good idea.
Now, the fabric that we're using here is actually a non-woven that you can see the difference. This is a non-woven that hasn't been washed at all.
Oh, like a felt.
It's just like a felt. And then this has been hand-dyed. It's the same type of felt, but it's been hand-dyed, and by doing that, you are also washing it.
Like felted wool.
Like felted wool.
Interesting. This beautiful, adds quite a bit of texture.
It does.
Great, okay.
Now, in addition to doing the applique pieces, and like I said, I've broken them up to be in different color groups, so it makes it easy for you to lay them out. What I like to do, Cindy, in order to get my pattern pieces to stay put while I'm cutting them, I take the temporary spray adhesive, and you want to hold it about 6 to 8 inches away from what you're spraying, and just lightly spray the back.
That's all you need. I think a lot of people tend to use too much.
Too much spray, right.
So that's all you need. Great.
Just need a little bit, and then that will hold that firmly on there, and you'll be able to cut that out and not lose your pieces after you've cut them out, because you do want to leave the little design piece on the felt until you get ready to put it on your piece.
Okay.
So that helps you keep track of things.
And plus they're so small, if you don't have the piece on there, you won't know what it is, really.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay.
And I like the fact that, you know, I have actually traced these from the design onto, or you can run it through the copier and just make a template like this out of paper. And when you cut it out, you want to make sure that the writing is up right side up so that you can see it.
I want to show this.
Because some people use template plastic, and that's okay too.
And I want to show this one more time because this is ingenious to separate the groups of the colors, because really you just cut this out in a big piece
chunk,
and then just put the big chunk right on the color.
And that way you're not wasting any of your precious colored hand-dyed felt either.
Right, that's right.
Now the next step is I want to be able to have a foundation. As you notice on the tote bag, it has a blue background piece and a yellow kind of background piece. You're going to be amazed to find out that this is actually white stabilizer. That you
painted or dyed?
That we painted or dyed.
I thought these came white or black, so you
white or
added
black.
color.
And a little tip I wanted to point out to you, know how they're always white like this? If you stick the label down inside of it, then you'll know later what that thing's supposed to be used for.
That's a great tip.
But this particular cutaway type of stabilizer allows you to use textile paint or even silk dye paint.
Or ink maybe.
Or even ink. If you're stamping, you can stamp it. But isn't this great?
Yeah, it looks gorgeous.
You're actually making a stabilizer in color that's going to be part of your applique piece. This can be washed and washed. What we do is we do rinse out the excess dye when we do it. And then by pressing it, that sets the paint.
This is as good as fabric because you can put all these colors and you can wash.
Oh, that people are going to get very excited about playing with that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing then is creating the background for the piece. And our yellow piece, as you can see, we just laid this in a little bin and dyed a bunch of them at one time. But I like to take the temporary spray adhesive again to keep everything in place. I just lightly spray the back of it. And this really aids you a lot in having things stay in place. And then I want to center it.
No more pins.
No more pins sticking you or being in the way.
Right.
That's the good part.
Plus it would make...
Right. Now, I have been using on this particular project a cotton thread. And this cotton thread is actually a 12-weight thread. That means it's very thick. But it runs through your sewing machine just fine if you use a 14 or a 16 size needle, a 90 or 100. If this is these threads snap open, and a lot of people don't realize that it's very easy then to get the end of the thread when you need it.
That is too cool. And so your threads, I have to change my threads so I can get my workroom cleaned up. We all have threads everywhere. Like that's a great tip. Right. Great.
Of course, I've used the navy to match this. And this is just a little blanket stitch that's on almost everybody's sewing machine. And we just lined it up with an applique foot on the machine.
Perfect.
Okay, and then the next step would be to develop the piece of the birdhouses. Now, as we've shown in these little pieces, we cut them out and we have bunted two of them together, budded them together. I don't know which way that you say that, but it works out that they're just placed snugly together. And when I first did this, I did this little piece first. Center here, I used one of those joining stitches that's on your machine.
Perfect.
It's like kind of like elastic. It's really cool. And then another little blanket stitch. And I just progress as I go, and I put the roof pieces on. Now you've noticed that I've been building all this on this little stabilizer piece. So this not only acts as an applique piece, but also as your stabilizer.
Yeah,
isn't that great?
It's great.
And I like that because as you're working with the wool, it tends to build up, and you don't want to have such a big buildup that you can't sew over it well.
Boy, that is a great tip.
So this works out really well for that. As I'm placing my templates, I'll get into that in just a moment, but I took a little tote bag and I just opened it up. Because this is going to allow us then to have a flat surface to build the design on and not have to be struggling getting that on your free arm. So you can set that aside. And you can see here that it's been placed on the open bag. And you want to make sure that your handle's out of the way. And we just build it right up like that.
Okay, and then tell me about, you placed all the little pieces with the guide.
With the overlay sheet, yeah, and it's really great because it shows you exactly where to put everything.
Good, and then once you have all the pieces down there, I see that there's an amazing
embroidered, and that's off of a embroidery card.
Okay, and if you didn't have an embroidery card, you have another option, these beautiful little eggs.
The little eggs that are on the other tote bag in case you don't have embroidery.
That's right, and final embellishments you can do
just buttons. A little button, and that's it.
I want to take a look at your vest. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's so pretty, and this is the felted wool.
Felted wool, to make the
pockets. Exact same way. Absolutely beautiful, and thank you again for being our guest here in Quilt Central. We love all your tips. You're a beautiful designer.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Today we have with us Pam Clarke. She's a celebrity long arm teacher and has 16 years of long arm under her belt. She also teaches a class called Fearless Beginnings all over the nation, and she's come today to tell us a little about that. Hi, Pam.
Hi, Janie. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I know when I first started long arm quilting 16 years ago, it was real frightening.
There wasn't anybody to help us.
There was nothing. It was really scary. So when I teach this, I want to make sure that everyone is really comfortable with the way they learn their designs. It took me about 100 hours, and I practice a business. There are times that you do need to make sure that you work on your customers' quilts, but you should always spend some time learning and practicing so that you can always better your quilting.
Right.
Anyways, what I do is I have 7 different designs that I have learned that I use almost in all the quilts that are behind us. And what I do is there's like a figure 8 or a loop design right here, and then there is this leaf design, a heart and loop, a wave design, the E's and L's, and this is called continuous curve or arcing or maybe cathedral window. Another one is the clamshell. Now once you learn these designs, you see them on paper. I have them on paper here, but maybe you have them as a stencil.
Right.
But you want to practice them, but you're scared to do them on a customer's quilt.
Right, you're just afraid you're not going to be perfect enough the first time.
Exactly. So what you can do is you can draw this up on paper, go copy it. I use a little bit of basting spray on the back of my paper, and all I need to do is spray the back of it. It makes it tacky. And then I do this on a practice piece of muslin, not on a customer's quilt. I unthread my machine and take the bobbin out, and then what I do is I practice over the paper.
So you just stitch with no thread?
No thread. And then, especially if you don't have a stitch regulator, because some of us might have an older machine that doesn't have a stitch regulator,
right.
And you need to know your stitch length. So what you do is, this is going to help you to keep the curves going.
Because it punches all the little holes.
Right. And then when
and
then when you flip it over, you can see how well you're quilting. This is a really good exercise, even for the more advanced long arm quilters, if they're trying a new design. And you're only throwing away a piece of paper.
Right.
And anyways, another thing that I do is this heart and loop design.
Yes.
People love feathers.
Yes.
And if you can only think of a feather as a half of a heart, that's all you need to do. So if you look at this, we have this feather design. You always want to do the spine. But for practicing purposes, all you have to do is do a line and put a heart shape on it.
That would be simple.
It's very simple.
Cut out of cardboard and trace around it.
Exactly, or take a stencil and draw it on paper and practice it and really look at the feather, because the feather is a half of a heart. Long arm quilting has to be, for me anyways, it has to be simple.
Yes.
You know, and it has to be fun.
That's what takes the fear out of it, the fun.
Right. Yes, you want to have a good time doing this, plus you also want to do this, like me, I do this as a business.
Yes.
And I don't want to get in a rut. So all of this I've done with the, practicing on paper.
Okay, well.
Another thing that I use that really helps is I have a stencil that I really like to use for reference lines. We have a thing that's called like an E's and an L, and I'll be stitching this in just a minute for you. And I'm going to take this and I use a pounce pad, because it's really important to see your lines if you're going to be chalking.
I see you like the blue.
I love the blue, and because I have to see it. And all you're going to do is just put light dusting across this. And I'll tell you a really good hint for E's and L's.
Okay.
All right? Because sometimes if you're just doing these E's and L's, and that's this design right here, you get to the corner and you have 2 L's or 2 E's. Well, if you use this stencil right here and you mark the lines, it's really silly, but it works. You put an L on the line and an E in the empty space. L for line, E for empty.
Oh,
okay? So it's really easy to remember. And I'll show you how I'm going to stitch some of these designs. The continuous curve is a really nice design because that really takes place of our quarter inching like we used to do in the hand quilting.
Yes.
And I'm going to start right here.
Yeah, we'd love to see you try some of the designs you just showed us on the paper there.
And then I'm going to take and I'm going to do an arcing motion. And I want to just lock my stitches a little bit. And I want to come down to the intersection, down through there. And I want to make sure that I make a nice arcing motion with this. And this is a really good thing to practice on paper again, because it does take a little bit more practice than what we normally would do. I come up here.
Orange peel, I think some people call it.
Sometimes the girls call it lemon wave. I just call it continuous curve because that's what I learned. And then I'm going to do the little wave.
You can quilt a sampler easy, and samplers are one of the harder things to do because you just don't quite know what to do.
Exactly, and I like to treat a sampler quilt as, so this is the hearts and loop lock I was telling you about that I learned how simple. There are lots of stencils out there that you can, clamshell is another one it's a little more difficult to do, but once you learn the arcing of it, because it's really just part of this continuous curve, and I'm not going to finish this because I really want to come down and show you how to do my feather. I'm going to come down.
Well, 7, I don't think 7 is too many to learn. I think you should be able to memorize 7 okay.
Oh, and really, they're just simple shapes. And you know what? Another thing you can do is you can actually just draw this on paper and not quilt it, but really just draw it with a pencil and paper. And once you learn how to do that, it really makes a big difference. This is going to really take the fear out of your long arm quilting by knowing your design and just a little bit of practice, not a lot.
Right
See how the heart shape? Yeah? Yep, and I'm just going to come through here.
Come right over there.
Now, L on the line,
E for empty.
This series here today, I am working up the side of the quilt. I usually do this at the bottom of the quilt because it is a little bit more difficult to stitch up the side. But I just wanted you to see you can work up the side of the quilt without too many problems. And all the way up.
That is beautiful.
And then I'm back to my E.
That is wonderful. I would think that that would be a wonderful class to take. And if you could work on those 7 by the needle punching through the paper, we'd be in.
And another thing, you have to be really comfortable with your machine. You know, you have to kind of bond with it. You know, feel really good with it and just like know how it's going to run for you.
Quilt Central teaching, and you can teach this class for us.
Charlotte and Ike Erwin need us working artists from their home studio to the music room in their lovely home in the Lower Town section of Paducah.
Make small, complicated little landscapes, usually with some figurative things going on in it. I also do some marbling of papers and do some bookbinding. Craftsman, he makes books in the fine press binding technique, and Japanese bound books, bookmarks, little paper weavings out of the marblings we do. Occasionally I'll just paint a big oil painting for the release of it. When
I met Charlotte, my wife, I told her of my interest in repairing books, being able to do that, and except I didn't know how to go about learning. She immediately pulled out of her file a list of schools that offered book binding courses, and John C. Campbell was one of those schools. Well, immediately I asked her to marry me.
Most people, you know, they tease us about it as a married couple. We're together 24 hours a day, living and working in the same space, but you know, we're lucky enough that we wouldn't live our lives any other way.
The Erwins have a lot in common with their neighbors as participants in the Artist Relocation Program.
It gives us an opportunity to purchase a house at a reasonable rate with excellent support.
You know, my husband and I have been out there probably as artists for 25 years, and this is the best move we've ever made, to have a live workspace finally, and I love the neighborhood. Lower Town is, when we came here, you know, the people were so friendly, and then all the artists that have moved here with common lifestyles and goals and interests to be able to make new friends. There's people from all over the country that have come here.
The Erwins are sharing their dreams together in Lower Town of Paducah, Kentucky.
Our guest today is a remarkable designer. She puts beads on everything, from her purses to her quilts. Join me in welcoming Marinda Stewart. Hi, Marinda.
Hi, Cindy. Good to see you.
Yes, what are we going to do today?
Handbags, hottest thing around.
They are so hot. A custom-made handbag. I love it.
Custom-made handbag. If you open any fashion magazine, there are pages
of... Are they hard?
They're very easy, and when you see the prices in some of the high-end stores they're getting for this, you'll want to make one of these.
Yeah, good. Show me.
Well, first of all, I did my own pattern, partially based on this fabric because I wanted to make sure I could center the motif in the bag.
Okay.
So I cut it out, made my pattern, added my seam allowance, cut it out, and I would suggest that you do all of your machine quilting before you start beading. That way you don't have to worry about the sewing machine catching the beads when you do it. So,
good tip.
And that gives you a little bit more body to bead against.
Your quilts too.
Yep, exactly. Beads are the last thing that go on. They're the frosting on the cake, literally and figuratively. So this is my motif, and we've got a bag here finished on the set.
Okay.
So I went ahead and, in the interest of time,
started it,
and threaded my needle, so I didn't.
Match the color of the bead you're putting
I always match the thread to the color of beads.
Okay.
And if I can't do that, I match it to the background.
Okay.
One or the other.
Okay.
In this instance, since I'm doing purple sequins on purple fabric, I have purple thread. And in this instance, with sequins, because they're going to be layered like fish scales, you want to start at the bottom and work up so that your sequins overlap each other as you come up.
Okay, great.
And you just take a small stitch. This is always so much fun to do on camera, to try to keep your fingers where people can see them.
That's okay.
There we go. So you're going to run the needle through it, and you're just going to tack it down with a stitch.
Okay.
And I would do that twice, and then I would repeat, working across and then back.
So when you put your needle back in here, do you come up where the next bead's going to go?
Yes, so I will come down here.
Okay.
I will come up right about there.
Okay. Now these tiny little beads, do you bead them in the same fashion?
Those are seed beads. And we bead those in the same fashion. I have this wonderful tray that actually is not designed for beads, it's designed for paint. But it allows me to put a palette of beads out, and they don't get away from me.
And you just picked them all up on your needle.
You just pick them up on your needle.
And you string a row at a time.
You do.
Great idea.
I never do much more than about 3 or 5 at a time.
Okay.
And because this is going to be a handbag and get some heavy use, I'll go through it 2, maybe 3 times.
Okie doke. And once your beading is completely done, then you're ready to...
Not off. Then you go ahead and assemble the bag.
Okay, and so on this particular bag, we have a bottom, and it's also lined. So we sew the lining together.
I made a pocket that'll be stitched to the lining.
That's handy. That's where my house key always hides.
House key, business cards.
Right.
This day and age, a pocket this big is a cell phone.
Yeah, that's right. And then I noticed on the purse you made, it had a beautiful decorative handle, but if you didn't have a handle, you could also make one out of heavy cording.
Yep, make heavy cover cord.
That's great.
The handles, though, are increasingly easy to find.
Okay, good, good. Any of the craft stores,
Well,
fabric
because
stores?
handbags are so hot, everybody's coming out with accessories that you can use.
Then I noticed that you made one of your bags here, fussy cutted out the fabric.
Fussy cut out of fabric
Okay.
and quilted it. And then what I did on that one is I did both sides and then invisibly ladder stitched them together.
Okay, and here, this is another type of a panel where you
Yeah.
beaded applique that you added on, or...
Your rectangular tote bag, and I've used 3 different fabrics and beaded the fish and beaded the polka dots to look like fish bubbles.
You're going a little crazy, because I've seen beads on everything now. Look at these beautiful
you know,
books.
if you stand still long enough, you could end up with beads.
I can't wait. Actually, I want to end up with the purse, the one that matches. But this is
Well, if you don't like hand sewing, and there are many people that don't, what I did is I used a good quality jewel glue, and I glued my beads onto the cover of a fabric-covered book.
So it's glued on.
It's glued.
And that looks like heirloom lace, but you just used a piece of lace.
It's store-bought lace, cut out the motifs, added some pearls and some sequins, and finished it off into a handmade guest book, which is a lovely gift.
And every time I've seen you, you have gorgeous jewelry on. So, of course, beading is one of the...
Easily distracted by bright, shiny objects.
That's right. And I see on most of your quilts, beads everywhere on your quilts and on the wall quilt behind you.
Yeah.
It's endless.
It's endless,
In
indeed.
your jacket.
Beads, beads, beads.
That's beads. Well, thank you for being with us. I love your tips, and I'm going to make myself a purse.
Good. You'll have fun.
I hope Marinda will let me borrow that purse that she just made.
And I love the beaded jewelry she made to match it.
Well, she'll be coming back next week to show us how to make a photo quilt, and I can't wait.
Right.
And the talented long-arm quilter is going to show us 3 different ways to make the same quilt top.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Quilt Central.
Quilt around the clock. Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program.
My first line, at least I know it by heart. Hi, I'm Cindy Walder.
She'll be coming back next week to show us how to make a photo quilt.
Great.
I can't wait.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. We also invited a judge. Sorry. Yes, and we'll also have invited... Either I have to ad-lib or read, but you can't ad-lib. Well, thank you for joining us today. And
Quilt Central is made possible in part by Janome America. Janome, because you simply love to sew. American Quilters Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Sulky of America, makers of decorative threads, stabilizers, and books. Ulfa, the original rotary cutting system. A-1 Quilting Machines, precision quilting machines. A-1. American Professional Quilting Systems, APQS, offers a full line of hand-guided quilting machines. June Taylor Company. Krause Publications. Milliken & Company. The Warm Company. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Now you can celebrate quilting in your everyday living. To purchase videotapes of this or any episode of Quilt Central, you may call toll-free 1-866-PADUCAH or 1-866-723-8224.